This is a narrated version of Chapter 2, Criminal Profiling, Science, Logic, and Cognition. Science, Logic, and Cognition. Criminal profilers need to understand how valid inferences are made. An inference is a particular type of conclusion based on evidence and reasoning. This differs from a speculation, a conclusion based on a theory or conjecture without firm evidence. Valid inferences require use of the scientific method, an applied understanding of the science of logic, and an understanding of bias. Bias. The scientific observer is inherently imperfect. Subtle forms of bias, whether conscious or unconscious, can easily contaminate objectivity. Observer effects are present when the results of a forensic examination are distorted by the context and mental state of the examiner. Examples include the examiner's subconscious expectations and desires. Adherence to the scientific method is the first step that can blunt the effects of bias. Science and the scientific method. The scientific method is a way to investigate how or why something works or how something happened through the development of hypotheses and subsequent attempts at falsification through testing and other accepted means. The steps of the scientific method are as followed. 1. Observation. 2. Hypothesis. 3. Experimentation. Falsification. Falsification is the act of refuting or disproving a hypothesis or a theory. It is the cornerstone of the scientific method. If a hypothesis remains standing after a succession of tests or experiments fail to disprove it, then it may become a scientific theory. Scientific theories that withstand the test of time and study eventually become scientific principles. Critical thinking refers to indiscriminately questioning all evidence and assumptions, no matter what their source. Two components of critical thinking are 1. A set of skills to process and generate information and beliefs, and 2. The habit, based on intellectual commitment, of using those skills to guide behavior. The science of logic. Logic can be defined as the process of argumentation and the science of valid thought and reasoning. The basic principles of logic are 1. The principle of identity, 2. The principle of the excluded middle, and 3. The principle of sufficient reason. Reasoning. There are two general categories of reasoning behind the criminal profiling process. 1. Inductive. This is comparative, correlational, or statistical process often reliant on subjective expertise. 2. Deduction. Forensic, evidence-based, process-oriented method of investigative reasoning about the behavior of a particular offender. Induction. An inductive argument is where the conclusion is made likely, a matter of some probability, by offering supported conclusions, a prediction of what might be true. There are two types of inductive arguments. 1. Inductive generalization, and 2. Statistical arguments. Deduction. Deductive reasoning involves arguments whereby, if the premises are true, then the conclusions must also be true. The conclusions flow directly from the premises given. Fallacies of logic. Logical fallacies are errors in reasoning that essentially deceive those whom they are intended to convince. Examples: suppressed evidence or card stacking, appeal to authority, appeal to tradition, argument ad hominem, emotional appeal, post hoc ergo propter hoc, hasty generalizations, sweeping generalizations, false precision. Metacognition. Metacognition refers to one's ability to estimate how well one is performing, when one is likely to be accurate, and when one is likely to be in error. Metacognitive dissonance refers to believing oneself capable of recognizing one's own errors in thinking, reasoning, and learning, despite either a lack of evidence or overwhelming evidence to the contrary. This ends this narrated version of this PowerPoint.